opposite of addiction is flourishing. Well, to me, that flourishing is a relationship with Christ.
Welcome to Intrinsically Motivated, where we're having conversations with experts in the field of addiction, recovery, and those who've been affected by it as we seek to mobilize the church to replace addiction and mental health challenges with flourishing. Episode 2 features a conversation with Teronya Holmes. She's a member of the Uplift Appalachia Board of Directors. We'll discuss her personal connection to addiction and recovery and how her involvement in this work reshaped her life in a dramatic way. I'm Tanner Clements, and I'm the Media and Training Director for Uplift Appalachia.
I'm going to kind of start in the middle and then go back. Because the first time I met you was walking into this building.
Yes.
Tell me about kind of where you were in life.
Okay.
And what you walked into and what that did, what that was like for you and kind of how that has affected you kind of going forward.
Okay. Well, at that point, just not going back into the whole backstory, I was looking for ways to get involved in helping people who are struggling with addiction because of what I had been through and how my eyes had been open to that problem. I didn't really know what I was coming to. I kind of thought this was just a bunch of do-gooders trying to prove that they're trying to do something good in the community.
Right.
Not church-wise, but I was thinking more it was like community people and leadership in the area and things. So I was really at a place where just hurting and struggling from what I had been through and being disillusioned and what I thought was a lack of help for people and a lack of church response to the problem. So when I met your mother, Andy, at an event, a United Way event in Kingsport, and heard about Holy Friendship Collaborative, I just kind of started tracking and keeping in touch and trying to figure out what it was. And I went to the big event, what was it called?
Holy Friendship Summit, yeah.
Yes, Summit.
Yeah.
I went to that event and listened and learned a lot. And then when they started meeting and having the prayer meetings and gatherings, I saw an email about the one that was happening here. And I had a rough day and I was thinking, I don't really want to go listen to a bunch of people talking about how great, how great they're doing at helping this community. I wanted truth, I wanted answers, I wanted realness. But I thought, I'm going to go because I'm trying to get involved, I'm trying to figure out what's going on around here. So I came and I walked in and I was a few minutes late. And it was really quiet. It was very peaceful. And I just walked in and was like, oh, okay, this might be what I'm looking for. So just came in and I knew we had an opportunity to pray for prayer concerns that others had written down and to write down our own. And then every now and then folks would get up and speak like you or Becky Haas or your mom.
Yeah.
And kind of pray or give a testimony. And it just that's what touched me. I'm like, these are people that care. These are people that have answers to the problem.
Yeah, it was always like, we loved doing those prayer nights. And it's like, we would forget how simple it was too. It's like, you know what, we're just gonna sit around and pray. And every time we would, something crazy would happen. Like, it shouldn't have seemed crazy, but it always kind of was. And it's like, whenever somebody would come in for the first time, like, oh, we really are just going to sit here and pray? Oh, it's I hate that it seems so different.
Yeah.
But it's like, this is very different than what everybody else was doing. Yeah. And I mean, we didn't workshop and brainstorm. It was like, let's just try praying and see what happens. And God did amazing things. So you talked about, and I wanted to kind of start in the middle just so we can kind of go both directions from there. So you said you came in and you were kind of in a hurt place from past things that had happened. Tell me a little bit about what had led you up to that point where you were really struggling to look for people who were genuinely looking to help people who were struggling with addiction.
So I grew up very normal in the church, Christian my whole life, and consider myself pretty normal lady, mom, whatever. But you always think of people who are struggling with addiction as like, oh, those people have issues that I don't understand, or we just tend to marginalize them and try to keep our distance because they're so different, but it's not, we're not.
Right.
We're not different. It's everybody. It could happen to anybody, I guess is what I'm trying to say. I struggled with, I had to have a surgery. It was a female surgery, and I did fine with that. They did send me home with a lot of pain medicine, and I tried very hard not to take any of it because I'm pretty tough and I don't normally take pills for anything. So I took it for a day or so and quit taking it. Was doing great. But exactly a week after that surgery, I had a hernia of my intestine out of nowhere. We don't know what caused it, but it was horrific, and it sent me back in for an emergency surgery, and they opened me up from stem to stern, and I almost died, and it was a lot of pain, and I was sent home from having 3 different surgeons working on me with 3 different kinds of opioids. And I had a lot of questions, how much of this can I take? And I'm in a lot of pain. I don't want to take this. But the standard response was, oh, don't worry. We've got to stay on top of the pain. So I was taking it, maybe not as much as they were prescribing, but I was taking it for a few days. And then finally, I thought, well, I'm starting to feel a little better. Maybe I should lower my dosage. I wasn't getting much guidance from the doctors. Again, they were like, just stay on top of the pain. If you're in pain, go ahead and take it. So I would try to come off of it, but the pain would return. So I would start taking it again. What they didn't consider back then is that at some point, the actual pain you're in flips over to what they call opioid flu, or the true pain from the opioids, not from the original injury or illness or surgery or whatever.
The pain of not taking that pill anymore.
Correct. And so I could not distinguish that. I didn't know the difference. To me, pain was pain. It wasn't like one was in my head and one in my foot. It was just pain. So I was living in kind of a fog for 3 or 4 months. Lost a ton of weight, could not function really. And my mom got very worried. And she finally went to a pharmacist in Kingsport and asked some questions, a compounding pharmacist, and kind of said, she can't eat. Do you have something she can take to help her eat? And explained the whole situation. And this pharmacist said, ma'am, you just described classic opioid addiction, and your daughter needs help. And if her physicians won't help her, you all need to get her into rehabilitation, get her somewhere that she can get off of these and get the help she needs. So I talked to my doctors, and again, their answer was, you're not addicted. Are you still in pain? Yes, I'm in pain. If I quit taking this, the pain comes back. Well, then you're okay. Keep taking it. And I knew that was not what I was supposed to do. So being too embarrassed really to ask anybody else for help and not knowing where to go, I just decided I'm going to do this on my own. And I did, and it was horrific. It was the worst experience of my life, and it lasted for several weeks. When I was finally, off of the opioids, I was sick for a long time, just weak and sick, and could not really function properly for about a year. And then really it took me about 2 years to gain my strength back. And I had missed out on a lot in my life during that. I mean, I was there, but I wasn't really present, So it scared me, and I was worried, and I had started hearing the rumblings of the opioid epidemic at that time, and having come from a pharmaceutical sales background, I knew what was happening, especially in my time spent in Southwest Virginia. We would see what we called pill mills pop up here and there. I didn't understand it completely, but so I started looking into it more, and during all this, a friend of mine's son was caught with drugs, marijuana, in his backpack at school, and they could not get the help that they were looking for. He was essentially just kicked off of the teams that he was on, given out of school suspension. She couldn't find help from anybody at the school. She couldn't find help from anybody at their church. She didn't know where to turn for help for her son, and she just felt like they were being ostracized, so she got mad. And she started calling a lot of people, parents and other people in the community, and she kind of organized some events to get people talking. That's how I heard about the event that the United Way was having, bringing in a speaker to talk about, this man was coming in to talk about his son who had become addicted to opioids after a football injury in high school and then died from his addiction. So it was at that event that I met your mom and heard about the Holy Friendship Collaborative.
I have a couple of different thoughts. Just kind of, so how, obviously at the beginning it was, if you're in pain, you should keep taking this because you shouldn't feel pain. Going through that and then knowing what you had to go through to kind of get back out of it, obviously there's a lot of pain and discomfort that you're obviously experiencing, all that. How's your opinion of that idea of like, you shouldn't be in any pain or anything? Like, how has that kind of shifted your mindset after kind of going through all of that?
Well, I never had the opinion that people shouldn't go through pain because I grew up an athlete. I had migraine headaches growing up and female issues that were very painful. So I had been through a lot of pain and I dealt with it. You know, I didn't turn to drugs or anything for it. However, I also had a medical background and like I said, I was in pharmaceutical sales and worked in outreach and sales for the hospitals. And from that, I knew that the mantra at that time was keep on top of the pain. You've got to control the pain. It will affect the mental health of your patients. That was being pushed by the pharmaceutical industry. So that became a big deal, and you would see a lot of pain management clinics pop up and different things. You know, like I said, these pill factories essentially popped up. And our area was very susceptible to that because Appalachia had been through a lot at that point. I mean, the coal industry had shut down, the mines had shut down, people had lost jobs, they were going through depression, they had, you know, problems with their lungs, they had problems with their backs and necks. They were in a lot of pain, both physically and mentally at that time, and looking for help. And not even just physically and mentally, but also fiscally, depression really. You know, they were struggling with poverty. So it was like the perfect storm when the pharmaceutical industry started pushing these drugs.
Here's a way to not feel the things that you're feeling.
So it was kind of like, I knew that whole thing of don't feel pain was not right. But on the other hand, I understood too that how the effects of pain, if left untreated or unaddressed, could lead to other disorders mentally and otherwise. So I didn't know the answers at that time. And when your physicians who you trust are saying it's okay. And I knew, you know, my physicians were wonderful. I loved them. And I know they cared about me. But that's what they were being told. And that was
the best thing to do is this.
Yes,
and so, like you said, it's not necessarily their ill meaning even.
Right.
It's just like, this seems like the right answer.
Right, this is the science.
Why would we... We're not going to go off on that tangent, but why would we? But it's like, why would we want you to feel any discomfort if, you know, it's like we've advanced technologically so well. Why would we want people to? And for the most part, we don't want people to be uncomfortable. But at the same time, what are you giving up to not feel that pain? And I think that's kind of what it sounds like. You kind of have this realization: I'm going to have to go through something a little bit more uncomfortable, so as not to feel this discomfort that I'm in now, because one of them ultimately isn't going to sustain me for very long. So,
and what is that pain driving you to? You know, where exactly are you trying to get? Are you trying to get rid of pain completely, or are you trying to find ways to cope with it? I think we all have to realize at some point in our lives, pain is a part of life, and we're not always going to be able to get rid of pain. But we can learn how to live with pain in different ways and the ways that we cope with it.
Yeah, I love what you said about what is that pain driving you toward? Like, is it like driving you just deeper into trying to numb things, or is it actually driving you? Because I mean, one of the things that we talk about here a lot is like the opposite of addiction isn't just not addiction, but it's actually like flourishing. And like you're moving towards something that's positive. It's like, and like you said, you were there, but you weren't there for a while. So I guess it was easy to kind of pinpoint and say, I really wasn't flourishing during that time.
Exactly. I was numb during that time. So, you know, the opposite of pain, you know, you said the opposite of addiction is flourishing, or there are other things that I could fill in there too, but the opposite of pain, is that no pain at all, or is, you know, what is that? The opposite of pain, finding a way to live with it. What does it drive you to? I think living with pain can lead you into understanding what it's like to not have pain. Does that make sense? Like, you can't understand not having pain. You can't understand the opposite of pain unless you've experienced pain.
That's a big thought. Like, you can't know that there's something ultimately, maybe not even in this life, but like there's something beyond, like you can't know that there's something better for you if you haven't
Right.
experienced something that reminds you this isn't everything.
Right. Well, every time I get an injury, like if I hurt my back or if I get sick and I'm having a stomach virus or something like that, and I'm in the middle of that, I think, oh, when I feel better, I am going to get out there and do all those things that I'm not going to sit in my house anymore when I feel better.
You don't appreciate
Right.
feeling healthy until you've
Exactly.
recovered from feeling sick.
Exactly.
Exactly. That's such a big idea that I think is worth driving home. The other thing you said in there that I think, and this kind of fits right in what I think we at Uplift are trying to do, is this idea of you had somebody in your life who saw you and cared enough to do something
Right.
on your behalf.
Yes.
Talk a little bit about how, so would you have been able to kind of get to that point on your own, do you think? Or did it take having somebody else?
I think it took having somebody else to be really, if I had been in my right mind, maybe I could have come to that. Maybe God would have brought me around. I believe God can do that, just you and him. But he used my mother. Of course, I got great compassionate care from my husband too, but he had no clue what was, she was the one that went to the pharmacist and tried to find that answer. He was just trying to take care of me.
Right.
So on my behalf, she went out and found some answers and came back and was that hard voice I needed to hear.
Right.
To say, listen, this is what's happening.
Yeah, and I think, sure, absolutely God can pull us out on our own, but oftentimes he doesn't.
Right.
Most of the time he doesn't.
Right.
And having somebody that knows you and cares enough to
Right.
step in is a big deal, I think. So.
Yes, most definitely is. And I had been through something similar years before. When I went through my pregnancies, I had hyperemesis gravidarum, which is where you are sick like 50 times a day, every day throughout your pregnancy. So I was on IVs, I was on drug pumps trying to keep me from dying and trying to keep the baby from dying. So that was a horrific experience, a very lonely experience, because when I was going through it 20 some years ago, they had not heard of that. So there weren't a lot of treatment options. There weren't people that understood it. I would get a lot of drink ginger ale and eat crackers. Nothing but make it worse. So at that time, I was very, like I said, extremely lonely. My husband was there. He was working. My mother was there doing everything she could, and my sister and a few others in our family. But most people didn't understand it. They're like, you're pregnant. You should be happy. You should be joyful and experiencing this. And I'm like, I can't. I've lost 40 pounds.
I would like to. But.
Yeah. So, but I did have a community that did come around me, which was our small group at church. And they just took us in. They brought food, stocked our freezer. I couldn't eat it, but James gained much more weight than I did during that pregnancy. And they would bring their children to visit. They would draw me pictures, sing me songs, bring me flowers. Those kind of things kept me going and kept the hope alive of there's going to be an end to this, and I'm hoping it's going to be a little baby in my arms at the end. And it was, I was very blessed that was the outcome both times. But when you're in that situation of hopelessness, you need people to encourage and to help pull you out of the depth of despair when you don't have hope.
So all of those things have kind of shaped you to where you were hoping to find something that was real and really wanted to help people in a certain way. So you come here, you could join us for the prayer meeting, and then around that time is when, and I'm probably condensing a lot of things because there's a lot of little details that happen in there, but Holy Friendship Collaborative continues to exist. You ended up coming on as executive director for a while there. And what were you trying to do while you were with executive director for the collaborative?
The collaborative was partnering with other organizations like Duke, the theology.
That one.
Yes. Let's just
Duke.
say seminary, theology, blah, blah, medicine and culture initiative. That's what it was.
Theology,
medicine and culture initiative.
Yeah, we found it.
At Duke. And some wonderful people there that were going into churches and helping them take a deep spiritual dive in different areas to help their congregations understand how they can maybe help to solve problems that existed in their community or in the world, hunger, other issues like that. So Duke professors were really, and their researchers were really intense in developing this program, and they wanted to partner with the Holy Friendship Collaborative to help address the problem of the opioid epidemic in Appalachia. And of course, they took a great interest in it and worked really closely with your mother and I and you, and we developed a program here to help churches in our region take that deep dive to understand addiction and understand the stigma that exists around addiction in our region that keeps us apart, keeps us from addressing the problems that exist. There's stigma both
right.
from the church toward addiction without understanding, not wanting to get involved, being scared of those people, that type of thing. Then there's also stigma toward the church from people who are struggling with addiction, who are wary of the judgment that they might feel coming from those who don't understand what they're going through, or who think they should just clean themselves up and get better. And I think that feeling is perpetuated a lot, even still today, even in churches who do have a heart towards those who are struggling. They still kind of keep them separate. It's kind of like, come Thursday night to the recovery meeting, and once you get better, once you clean up a little bit, then maybe you can come join us on Sunday mornings and be one of us. Right. So that stigma is still out there. And truthfully, I think we're all one. We are all struggling with addiction of some sort in some way in this world. Maybe not to substances, but there are other addictions that people struggle with. It could be a relationship that's not healthy for you. It could be sex. It could be pornography. It could be a lot of things that people are struggling, alcohol, or even work. There are so many things out there that we put up as idols that keep us separate from God and from each other. So I think if the church realizes that, then it will help to awaken and see that they can welcome those people in with open arms. Of course, you have to take precautions, but there are things that the church can learn so that they can deal with all of this in a way that makes us all one. And it's not just the people struggling with addiction that are missing out on being a part of the church. The church is missing out on being a part of a family with those who are still struggling and still, desiring that relationship with God, maybe feeling like they're not worthy. Or maybe it's somebody who struggled with addiction and has come to Jesus and submitted their life to Him and is, free from the stranglehold and the bonds of addiction. But once you've struggled with that, it's always going to be a struggle. You're always going to need help staying out of that. And you need the family and the relationships of church. You mentioned that the opposite of addiction is flourishing. Well, to me, that flourishing is a relationship with Christ. And attending a lot of recovery meetings in churches and otherwise, what I have found is that when they ask, how many of you have been clean for so long or over a year or whatever, the people that raise their hands, then they'll ask, well, what was it that was the key? 99.9% of the time, Jesus is what you hear.
Right.
So
a specific type of community.
Yes. I just believe that what we were doing, where we were going with the Holy Friendship Collaborative and helping to educate the church on this need and helping to equip the church to come alongside and be that army of helpers that's needed.
Right. And that's like almost exactly the same kind of mission that Uplift was. That was happening at the same time. And ultimately, the two kind of came together, and you're sitting on the board, and you're still, we're all still doing basically the same thing, slightly different name, that sort of thing. I think the part that is most interesting to me about your story, all of this is interesting, but like the part to me is how that kind of played itself out in your life even after you got involved. Because I think having experienced all the things you did obviously kind of was preparing you for something even bigger than any of this, I feel like. What could that have been? So tell me about how that has affected your family kind of moving forward.
Sure. So getting involved with with Andy and Becky Haas and you and Uplift and everybody, I learned so much and went through a lot of trauma-informed care training and mental health first aid training, and just learning about all the different ways that we as the church can get involved and can do our part. And there are many ways to do that, but one just presented itself to my family and me, and I was open to whatever God had in store. But my husband got a phone call out of the blue one day. And what it all comes back to is several years ago, he had coached a Little League basketball team. And there was a young man on that team. I think they were probably about 7 or 8 years old at the time. And James came home, that's my husband, and said, "Hey, that kid over there, he is one of your distant cousins." And I was like, "Really?" And I don't know him. He said, "Yeah, he's one of your distant cousins. I think he might have a kind of a sad home situation. We need to pray for him." And I was like, okay. So we prayed for him throughout that season. And over the next few years, we'd run into him at other ball events, things like that, school functions. And he'd say, "There he is. Let's pray for him tonight. Let's don't forget to pray." Okay. But yeah, he is like my fourth or fifth cousin. And I didn't really know his side of the family too well, but I knew a little bit about them. And at the time that we met him, he was being raised by his great aunt. And she came down with some serious health problems as she was advancing in age. But she called my husband out of the blue one night and kind of told us what was happening. And essentially, his name's Preston. He doesn't mind me sharing that. He's told me it's perfectly fine. She said that, he had been born addicted to drugs. He was an NAS baby. He was addicted to not fentanyl, but opioids. And had a really rough time with that. His mother had been in and out of prison for drug-related crimes, and his father had passed away before he was a year old. He was raised by his grandmother for a long time, and she also struggled with addiction and then passed away from her health problems with that. And that's when his great aunt took him in. And when she couldn't take care of him anymore, they were trying to find homes for him. He wasn't in the system at that time, a foster system or anything, but they were trying to find placements for him, and nothing was working. He was running away. At this point, he was in 7th grade, and he would run away, run back home to his great aunt, and she just couldn't handle it. So she called James, and James called me, and he said, "What should we do?" And I said, quick prayer, and then no real thought at all. Bring him home. So we did that night, that very night. We drove and picked him up, and we prayed about it before we got there. And I just said to my husband, I said, if we bring him into our home, we cannot let him go. We can't just say, "You're here for a time," and then God be with you, go on.
Right.
I didn't know what he was like. I didn't know what his personality was like, or God had brought us to that moment. God prepared us for it. He trained us for it. He brought our hearts to that moment. And we brought him home, and it was tough. It was tough for a while. I will not exaggerate and say it was all rainbow and candy. It was very tough. And I already have 2 boys, one older than him and one younger. And so there were a lot of concerns about how they might be affected or how they might affect him. But God has just amazingly worked all of those things out in ways that we could never have planned. So he just assimilated into our family. We adopted him not long after, about a year and a half after he came to live with us. The adoption was finalized. And he's one of us now, for good, better, worse,
right.
Whatever he might think it is. And I think he's just a wonderful young man. He does have issues, and he does have things that he has to deal with because of his past and the traumas that he's endured.
Right.
And it's just been a blessing to watch. It's been a beautiful thing to watch.
How'd that affect, how was that for your other boys and your husband? Like all that, obviously you're all going through it together because it's like,
right.
This is family. We're now all in on this together.
Right. Well, like I said, it has been tough. But who's to say it wouldn't have been tough if he hadn't come to live with us anyway. But he, everybody adjusted well. I think it was really good for my other 2 because they learned the world doesn't revolve just around them, and they did learn a lot about what people are struggling with what other people are going through.
Right.
You know, their lives were not that tough, and they've not had so many things to overcome, so many challenges, and now they get it a lot better.
Yeah.
And, you know, with my husband, he's that male figure that Preston never had, you know, and he's also got other strong male figures. Our pastor, he loves to fish, and they go fishing together. His coaches have been instrumental in football and track. They just love on him and
Right.
take a strong interest in him. So he is getting that attention and those bonds. You know, the extended family and my family and James's family have just brought him in.
Right.
And it's been a miracle. And from that, my niece and her husband just started fostering children too. They were affected by this whole thing, and they have brought home a baby who was born addicted to fentanyl and methadone. And he was born at 34 weeks. They got him at 37 when he was, 3 weeks old, really.
Right.
37 weeks. But, and he's doing really well. He's been with them almost a month now.
That's awesome. So, I mean, just kind of going back to what we said earlier, though, like, as we were talking about, like, what's your pain moving you toward? Like you said, it wasn't easy along the way, but you've kind of seen how it was worth kind of going through that for. Now you're seeing it affecting all these other people in ways that you couldn't have probably imagined at the beginning, that sort of thing. I don't want to play just hypothetical for the sake of hypothetical, but it's like, how have you seen each one of these things building to the next in your life in a really meaningful way?
Well, I struggle with, what's my purpose here, God? What am I supposed to do? And what's the next step? And it's never been exactly defined in my life. I've had 20 careers, and I'm one of those that just, if I lose interest in something or I find something else that I'm going to move on to that I feel like God has planned for me, that's where I go. And I'm not saying that like, oh, I'm just dedicated to God and I'm going to drop everything and follow. I wish I were like that more. But it's more that I'm open to where God's leading, and I'm open to what the next thing is. And if I feel like I can be of help, great, I'll jump in and get involved. But it's usually when I don't think I can be of any help that He uses me the most.
Right.
So I think a lot of this is just leading to just more of caring about people. I used to say, well, I have a skill for leading groups of people, organizing groups of people toward a common goal and that type of thing. Right now at this point in my life, in my 50s, I don't think that God's, maybe He is, but I don't think He's setting me up to lead some great, here's the answer to, addiction, Teronya, you're going to lead the way. I feel like it's more just serve, be the hands and feet of Christ, and go wherever I can be used, and then hopefully from that, teach other people along the way. It's a discipling process. I think that's what Uplift is really all about, is discipling others to become disciples.
Right. and just seeing that continue to kind of grow.
Right.
Because if everybody kind of gets that same itch,
exactly.
It's just going to keep going.
There's a verse that I love that a friend pointed out to me. So we talk about having wisdom and figuring out, what are we supposed to do next? What's the next thing? And how do we know this is the right thing to do? And of course, King Solomon, asked God for wisdom, and God gave it to him, and he was very wise, and he experienced a lot of things in his life. God gave him that wisdom he asked for. But when you read down a little bit further in 1 Kings 4:29, it says, "And God gave Solomon wisdom and understanding exceeding much, and largeness of heart, even as the sand that is on the seashore." So I don't know if Solomon asked God for largeness of heart too, but God saw fit to give that to him. And so I ask God for wisdom a lot. I always have, because James 1:5, I believe, says, "Ask if you don't have wisdom."
If you ask, He'll give it to you.
Exactly. So I've always asked for it. Sometimes I feel like He gives it to me, and sometimes I'm like, why aren't you giving it to me? But now I'm always asking too for largeness of heart. Expand my heart. And the prayer of Jabez, we used to pray a lot. People used to talk about that. Expand my territory. Expand my reach. Expand the number of people that are affected by this ministry or whatever you're involved in. But if God's expanding your heart, He's expanding it for others, to love the unlovable, to love the ones that you think, well, that I don't feel called to serve there. God's going to expand your heart to serve where you don't think you're called to serve.
That's awesome. The problem is you start asking for that and you start loving lots of people, then all of a sudden your household just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger or something like that.
And then I have to say, give me largeness of heart to love all these people in my house.
And give me largeness of space to keep all of these teenage boys somewhere
to
corralled.
feed them.
Yeah. Right, yeah. Largeness of food budget, please. That would be great. So obviously, Uplift is still, I mean, we've been working for a while, but I still feel like we're just like right at the beginning, scratching the surface of what do you hope to see happen going forward? I mean, if you were just going to big vision kind of like, what do you think? It can like, based on what you've seen God already doing in so many people's lives in different ways, what do you kind of think could be on the horizon?
Okay, so we hear that there are so many people and organizations and everybody out there thinks they have the answers to this problem, that problem, addiction, mental health, whatever it might be. I know we have the answer. I mean, it's Jesus. It is the Lord who heals and who saves. Jehovah Rapha, He is our healer. He is God, our healer. And we need Him. And big picture, I know some good people who know a lot in this area. Your mother, Becky Haas, you, so many others who are involved in all of this that understand it, that get it. Some people are involved in ways that they can't necessarily preach that word in their jobs, but we can come alongside them in the work that they do through Uplift. I see a big picture vision of the church hearing the message and understanding and gaining wisdom, but also getting it and gaining largeness of heart and finding incredible ways to serve. Maybe we can help them find those ways, or maybe they've already found them and they just need some organization, some people to come in and help them to manifest it in some way and to understand it better and to learn the terminologies and how to communicate.
Fill in the gaps.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. For sure. I think it's going to be, and I think having people who have experienced it from so many different perspectives, because I think every single one of us who are involved in Uplift have kind of touched the world from a different place, and I think that only helps us better understand kind of what we're trying to do.
Right. Everybody's got your mother with her background in research and science and understanding the psychology and science of addiction and how it relates to all this. And Becky Haas and her trauma-informed care, and you coming from the pastoral care world and understanding that as well, and also the collegiate ivory tower world,
right,
and understanding. Everybody brings their piece of the puzzle that can help those who are interested and want to get involved.
Yeah, and I think it's going to, well, and then you've got you who know literally everyone.
Boots on the ground.
In Appalachia, I feel like.
As my mother-in-law used to say, you can't open a car door without hitting somebody you know around here.
That has been my experience with you. It's like, oh, I know them. Oh, that's important too. Like having people that know and love people is what we need too, and people that are good at knowing and loving people,
right,
and living it out in impactful ways. And I think that we've kind of seen how that's worked in your life, and I don't think you would have changed any of it. No,
during the time,
it's hard while you're in it.
Right, it's hard, but it's worth it, right?
Hey, that's on a website somewhere.
Yeah,
I feel like
it is.
Yeah, but yeah, and I think that's really cool. Anything else you want to? Anything else in your? It doesn't have to be Uplift related. You could just go off on something. Anything else that we haven't talked about? You think is really worth talking about your experience, kind of in this whole thing that can be beneficial to people to know?
Well, one thing I will say is that, we talk a lot about understanding and gaining wisdom and learning things through educational pieces like trauma-informed care, mental health first aid, and those type of things. I think the world's viewpoint is traditionally a lot different from the biblical worldview on all of this. And by different, I mean that we tend to, in the world, make excuses for behavior and thinking that we're being kind and loving and helpful, we enable instead of actually help. I think that one of the key pieces that we bring to the table through Christ is truth, absolute truth. And you have to look that in the face for healing. So I want to encourage the church to stand on truth and compassion, love. You've got to have
They go
truth and
together.
charity, exactly, but not to shy away from truth.
Next time on Intrinsically Motivated.
Breaking bread together and forming deep relationships are the kinds of practices that can respond to the thorny, intractable issues that come with someone struggling with substance use issues.
Intrinsically Motivated is an Uplift Appalachia podcast. Uplift Appalachia seeks to replace addiction and mental health challenges with flourishing, and we believe that an intrinsically motivated church is the answer. To learn more, visit upliftappalachia.org.